My name is Nimit and I'm going to show you what JavaScript callbacks are with the help of an example. Now in one line, a callback function is like a worker which calls back to its manager once the task is complete. To explain you more, I'm going to dive straight into this example. So let's say we have a function called query which takes in one argument, right? This query function has a variable called result which is initialized by 0 and it just returns the result, right? Now let's create one more function called business logic, right? This is going to be our manager function. Now business logic has a variable called response and the value of that response variable is going to be the return from the query function that we are going to call with an argument of say 10, right? And then finally we just print the response and we need to call this business logic function so that it runs. So I'm going to run this and we are going to be seeing an output 0, right? Now why 0? So what's happening here? So we call our business logic function which calls the query function which returns with a result of 0 and we finally print that result, right? Straightforward, pretty easy. Now in JavaScript, especially in this age of web programming, more than 90% of our function calls are going to be asynchronous, meaning the response from that function is going to take some time. Let's say we are doing a DB query or a REST call, for example. These execution events are not synchronous, they are not instantaneous, so they will take some time to return with a result. Let's say, for example, our query function is also like that. So let's say it does a REST call or a DB query, right? Now, and then this DB query returns a result in 3 seconds, for example. So to simulate that, I'm going to use the setTimeout method of JavaScript, which takes in one function as an argument and we need to specify the delay, right? So this is going to be 3 seconds. So my function, let's say what it does is it sets the result variable with the arguments negative. So our function is going to return the negative of whatever argument we provide, but it is going to take 3 seconds to do that. It's a slow function, right? So now if we run the script again, we are going to see 0 as the output again. But so now let's see what's happening. We are calling the query function with the argument 10. So our argument is 10 now. We are initializing the variable result with 0 and then we are firing the setTimeout method and then we are returning the result which is still 0 because the setTimeout method will execute only after 3 seconds. So this is going to take some time, right? So if we want to test this, let's put one more example here, one more console log here, say timeout executed, right? So we expect to see this console after 3 seconds. Now let's run this. We see a 0 and 3 seconds later we see timeout executed. So we are still getting 0 in our response even though the result, let's print the result here to show you guys what the result is, right? So run timeout executed, and the result is -10, right? But our response is still 0. Now this manager function business logic wants to know when the query has finished. Only then we can proceed, right? Otherwise we'll get the wrong response. So what we can do is, to circumvent this problem, we can create one more function called callback, for example, which takes in one argument called data and then just prints that data, right? Now this callback function can be passed as an argument to our query function, right? So here I have a function. I'm passing the entire function, mind you, not the result of that function. I'm passing the entire function as an argument to CB here. And what we can do is call the CB function once we have the result. So when I execute this, I'm going to see a 0. I'm going to see a timeout executed after 3 seconds, and no. Alright guys, I've fixed the problem now. I just had to refresh the page. I don't know what was wrong. But anyways, so I was going to run this program. We have a callback function, and we are going to call that callback function once the setTimeout function has finished. So let's run this. We see a 0. 3 seconds later we see a timeout executed, and when we see a -10. So the output has not changed. So what's happening here? So we call the query function with the argument 10 and a callback function, which is the entire function here. The argument 10 is passed to the arg variable and the callback is passed to the cb variable. We fire the setTimeout method and then we return the result. Mind you, we don't wait for the setTimeout method to finish. We return the result. That result is printed here because we have returned from this function. Console.log response is the 0 that you see here. Now 3 seconds later, when the setTimeout function is finished, we are printing timeout executed and we are calling the callback function with the result, which is the negative of 10. So now once we call the callback function takes in data, which is result, which is -10, and then we print the -10 here. So this is what is happening. So now in JavaScript, we have one more feature called anonymous functions. Anonymous functions are basically functions without names. They are very, very useful in situations like this where you need to work with a bunch of callbacks. You don't want to keep naming every callback separately and then keep a track of which callback is for which part of the business logic, right? So what we can do is we can remove this callback method and then we can write our function right here without a name. So this is an anonymous function, and then this function, just like callback, takes an argument called data and then it prints the data, right? So let's run this and see how it works out. We see a 0 initially, which is okay, and then we don't see the timeout. All right. Okay guys, we are back. I think I know what the problem is, but let's just continue. So we have an anonymous function which accepts one argument called data and then prints the data. So we are going to run this program now and see the output. Alright, we see a 0 first as expected, and then 3 seconds later we see a timeout executed and then we see a -10. So the output has not changed, right? The functionality is still exactly the same. All we've done is replace the entire callback function with an inline anonymous function. This function is called the callback, which is called once the output is there for the query function. So this could be a REST call, a DB query, could have taken any amount of time that needed, and then once it finished, we just call the callback function and with the result which we can start using right here. Right now we are just printing the data, but then we can do any business logic that is needed. So that's it from me, friends. I hope you liked the video and found it useful. Thank you so much.